Faire la grasse matinée, and welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, is French for to do a fat morning.
Excuse me, a fat morning?
Mm-hmm. It's an idiom meaning to sleep in.
Oh, I like it. I like a fat morning.
Something we got to do this weekend because, surprise, no race.
We did.
I'm Drew Scanlon. Joining me, Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
Hi, Drew. Yes, of course. I feel like any good podcast has at least one episode every couple of years when everything they talked about is made redundant almost immediately on published time. And we certainly had that last week.
I think this is probably a new record for us. If you've been listening for a while, you know that things tend to break the moment our podcast is released. And this time, I think it was like a matter of 30 minutes or so that the entire race was canceled.
Yeah, we've had news break and it's been annoying. You know what I mean? Like somebody signs for somebody and it's like, oh, we have a podcast up that week and we're not talking about the big news. But for folks who are new to F1, we don't generally have an entire race weekend terminated, and especially we don't have it happen like days before the race even starts. I think that just goes to show just how serious the situation in Emilia-Romagna really was, because like, man, even like the only one I can think of was it the Bahrain Grand Prix back in, I think it was 2012 was the Arab Spring year when it got cancelled, maybe a week prior.
There was also Australia 2020.
But that got cancelled after people turned up on Friday.
Yes.
That was so super. So that's a good example of what usually happens. F1 usually waits until the last possible moment because gotta make that dough. Dough.
Speaking of making that dough, Rob Zachney out on assignment. I don't know that he's making dough. He probably is. He's a big baker, I think.
Yeah. Is he moonlighting? I feel like this is his moonlighting. Although with Waypoint's days numbered, perhaps it's not his moonlighting anymore. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, if you are new to this podcast, a very warm welcome to you. And if you are new to Formula One itself, we recommend listening to our preseason primer. It's an episode that assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. A little onboarding for everyone. This year's primer is episode 216. Also, this show is supported entirely by our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release bonus podcasts and videos exclusively for our patrons that cover racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. So what do we have going on this month, Danny?
This month we are delving into the wonderful world of anime to watch 2009's
Is that
Redline.
French?
Yes, that is. Yes, thank you very much. 2009's Redline, the anime about the most fastest and most prestigious race in the universe. Take that, Triple Crown. Is this the first anime? I mean, we did Speed Racer, the movie, which is
the live action movie.
Yeah, that's anime adjacent, manga
Certainly.
adjacent. But yeah, we're excited to watch that. So check that podcast out and the dozens of others. I mean, if you sign up as a patron today, you get access to years worth of them. Like these beautiful people, a lot of our amazing title sponsors: Alex Medina, Kick a Hat of the Art, at Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army, at Talking Autos, Olivia Evans, IronStation.dev, TelemetryDeck.com, FTC, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foot, Abdullah Althani, Jason Chadwick, Abraham Getchell, #Bunny Crimes, RIP Waypoint, Snigs, Alex Goucher, Max Voltar, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, Umberto Roca, William Romph, Irvine Clinical Research, Lachlan the Madden Man, and of course, the one true Jason Kelly.
Indeed. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
for supporting the show. And yes, I think we had mentioned that we were going to be recording Redline this week. We're going to wait another week, still get it in by the end of May.
Yes.
But we want Rob Zachney to be there because I have a feeling he's going to want to see this.
Yes, absolutely.
But yes, as we mentioned, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix at Imola was canceled due to weather. You may have seen in the news, there is heavy flooding in the region.
Incredible weather. Like, when Rob posted in the Discord, I went searching and I found, when you find tweets that are not in your language and you're like, I gotta double check this one because it can't be that bad. There was like, the picture was like the paddock underneath like 2 feet of water already on Tuesday. Yeah. I was like, there's no way it's that bad. And I looked it up, and it was like, oh my God, like the banks of that river just straight up burst that early. And as bad as it was at the track, some of the region was just, there was obviously a loss of life as well, loss of multiple lives, and just millions of lira worth of damage.
Yes, yeah. Obviously, our hearts go out to anyone affected by it. The race was canceled. Tickets, however, were refunded for those who had bought them to attend the race. Also, F1 TV got extended by 7 days.
Yeah, that was a funny one.
You may have gotten an email.
Yeah, it was funny because, like you said, I was feeling like lots of empathy for the people on site, but so it was weird to receive an email that was like, you know, talking
Don't
to
worry.
me as a victim. Yeah, I was kind of like, it's all right. Like, yeah.
Thank you. I feel much better now.
Yeah, I think they also donated $1 million to the relief effort.
Okay.
It's
I know
worth mentioning.
Ferrari
Sorry,
donated €1 million.
Euro, yeah. Yeah, good point. I'm saying lira and dollars. Euro. It's worth mentioning that one of the main reasons why events get called off, and one of the reasons why, in this case, Bruce Springsteen actually came under fire for going ahead with his concert, is that the reason people cancel it, among other reasons, is that it obviously takes a certain amount of the local resources which could be used in the emergency effort. So police and, you know, civil servants and ambulances and stuff like that.
Transport,
So,
yeah.
Transport systems, all that type of stuff, which obviously needs to be coordinated a lot more in the case of a regional disaster like that.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm very glad that we didn't wait, like Australia, until the last, literal last moment. I mean, people were, you know, personnel were there. It was Wednesday that it was called off. So that's usually when folks fly in, or a lot of them do. Some of them even earlier. But Monaco was actually in jeopardy for a moment because teams were only, much later allowed back to the track in time to rescue their equipment.
Oh, wow.
And take it to Monaco. But that, of course, will be going ahead. Imola probably won't be rescheduled because there's actually no slot for it to go into that wouldn't either shorten the summer break,
Right.
or create like a 4 or 5 race in a row, you know, quintuple header. Nobody wants that.
And probably when we're off in Asia or something, you know what I mean? And we have to like jump back to...
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a shame that the China slot was so early because we did have that weird gap
Right.
a couple of weeks back. Like, it's strange. Like, we're relatively far into the season, and in many ways it feels like there's been hardly any races.
Yeah. Well, there were some makeup races virtually. Speaking of COVID, the Williams team put on a charity race. Alex Albon and Williams team principal James Vowles raced in the event playing F1, the F1 2022 game. I will put a link to that and this next one in the show notes. Verstappen and Lando Norris played iRacing with Team Redline, and both of those were fundraisers to support the relief efforts. Also, Yuki Tsunoda was out there on the street cleaning it up.
Oh, you're kidding? Like, just
Yeah.
in the region?
Yeah, he's probably running for mayor. You should check this Twitter link that I have put here in the show notes.
I will. What a hero. Does he live in Italy?
No, he I think had just flown in there.
Okay.
I actually don't know if he lives in Italy because the team is based there.
Yeah. So
And I
that's what
remember
was
some part of
thinking.
Drive to Survive where they were like, Yuki, you really need to get in shape. Come see our trainer.
You really need to get in shape. Move to the land of pasta and pizza. He's really cleaning up the street. It looks like a beautiful street. I mean, Italy just is ridiculous, isn't it? Look at it. It just looks like a fairy tale.
Yeah.
Except for all the mud on the ground, I guess. But also, it sort of gives it a Middle Ages feel. Like, that's probably what it looked like when people were throwing chamber pots out of their windows.
True. I'll bet they don't want it to look that way, though.
That's
so I'm glad they have Yuki Tsunoda.
Oh, actually, now that I see it, there's a lot of basements there.
Oh, man.
That was probably not fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, best of luck to all the folks affected.
Yeah, absolutely.
Upgrade packages were one thing that we had talked about for Imola. that we obviously won't get to see. And it kind of varies by team how they're going to react to that. So some have opted to push to the following round at Barcelona, Catalunya, like Ferrari. But Mercedes will be introducing their upgrades at Monaco, so be on the lookout for that.
That's a good point, because like a lot of the like Monaco is such a weird little race. Like in many ways, the cars are not, when they're setting up their cars for the season, they're not really thinking about Monaco all that much. It's a spot where overtaking is tricky, and largely, especially in the case of teams like Haas, you just want to get through the weekend without breaking one of your cars. So I can totally see especially if it's coming to like top speed aero stuff, it's probably redundant, pulling it out in Monaco. In many ways, Emilia Romagna is probably not the best fit either, whereas Catalonia will be make a lot more sense. And then obviously they won't run the risk of damaging a part, and especially in this post cost cap world, it's not like they can just make another one. Like they have to be super smart and strategic about all that type of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. One other thing that I at least was looking forward to at Imola that won't be there for Monaco. Danny, what's this next piece?
Yeah, the new qualifying rules that we went into quite deep detail in, and talked about, I would say, numerous possibilities of what would happen during the race weekend and the various different ways in which this new qualifying
that episode wasn't all for naught, right? We got deep on potential strategies.
I feel like we were like really putting in the work to explore the space and make it so we had a hot run time for that podcast, because so it feels especially egregious that this was one that came back to buy.
There were emails. Those are evergreen.
That's true. Emails are evergreen. Really? We should go back and listen to some of the emails.
They weren't canceled.
But yes, one thing that was cancelled was the new qualifying rules, which we talked about. The new
pushed.
Yeah, sorry, pushed until Hungary, which is the final race before the summer break. So, like, in many ways, it's
end of July.
It's so deep into the season to be throwing this out. Like, it's just bad timing that they had this one for Imola. But yes, the new qualifying rules, which I'm not going to go into too much detail here because we did quite a lot last week, where they're basically ensuring the teams run specific tire sets for Q1, Q2, and Q3. Yep. All that stuff is going to be tested out in Hungary at the end of July, before we have our mandatory break in the summer. And for those of you who are new to F1, that does not just mean there's no races. That means that everybody in the factory, in the car, running the team, they all have to down tools.
Doing podcasts.
Actually, I wonder if they're allowed to do That's a good point.
I meant us.
Well, I mean, yeah, sure. But do you remember when they had in Drive to Survive, Christian Horner was just hanging out in his back garden, and like Jerry Halliwell asked him to do something, and he was like, "I can't. It's the summer break."
That's a pretty good joke.
I was even thinking, like, him being filmed for the documentary, did they have to have a special stipulation for that, or was that okay? I don't know.
God, that's probably outside the sporting regulations.
Right. One person who doesn't have to worry about working the summer break or ever again is the director of the television broadcast in Monaco, which I had forgotten was its own dude. All the other races are done by, they often, I don't know if they have all local or some local camera operators. I'm not sure about that. We went into detail a couple of years back about the helicopter and how that works, and how the camera op there is the same person, but the actual helicopter pilots themselves are different for each race. Or perhaps they're shared maybe between the two Italian races or something, but generally they're the different pilots. Monaco, for the longest time, has had a couple of its own weird rules. They used to do practice on a Thursday as well, and then take a break on Friday for, I think, regional commerce reasons. They scrapped that last year. There's also a weird rule with Monaco.
Wasn't it initially... Sorry, I thought that, and maybe this is just like one of those fairy
Urban
tales,
legend.
but yeah, I thought it initially came from like, that's when the prince likes to do his shopping.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised that they, like, In Monaco, who knows?
Yeah.
And the race has been going on for so long. I mean, it's
Right.
like almost 100 years that, like, you know, some of that stuff might be the case. For instance, the distance of the race in Monaco is significantly less based on the length of the track. So they have it, I think 305 kilometers is where they tap the distance of any race, and that's how they come up with the lap count. Is they basically divide the length of the circuit per lap by that. Monaco's 260 instead, and the reason was because before they had the two limits, there is a 3-hour limit for the race in totality, including red flags, and then there is a 2-hour limit for the race itself. Folks who watched last year's race will remember that we reached the 3-hour limit for the race in totality due to 2 red flags due to the rain. But Monaco's one is 260, and apparently the reason for this was because before I guess the cars were as fast as they are, and before they sort of sped up some of the turns, it was just taking them too long to get around per lap. So they actually shortened it, yeah. Whereas in the modern era, it seems like maybe it's kind of a redundant thing. But also, I feel like after, you know, however many laps it is, 78 laps of Monaco, I'm kind of done, you know?
Yeah. I don't think we need 106 or whatever.
Exactly. But one of the last rules, I guess, that has been taken off this year is that the race director, the TV director for Monaco, is no more. It's no longer some local dude who's managed to convince the FIA that he should be able to switch the cameras. What was that last year? It was they cut away from an overtake between Vettel and somebody. They just went to a random replay of Lance Stroll.
Yes.
And I remember, like, most of the time I feel like we don't notice the directors unless they mess up, right? It's one of those types of jobs, you know? But Monaco obviously was one where a lot of people noticed, and they noticed last year, and that might have been the final straw.
I mean, it can just, you know, manifest as a boring looking race. Where, you know, you wouldn't see some midfield battles going on because they choose to focus on the front, for example.
It's very true. And I think historically, if you're watching like F1 in the 90s, they did a lot more watching the front when stuff was going on in the back. But even recently, because of the sort of like popularity of F1 in recent years, I've started to see like lots of really cool citizen reporting style stuff. And there was this one YouTube channel I followed that last week posted a video of all the overtakes in Miami that were not shown on the broadcast.
Oh.
And it was like 10 minutes. So it was really interesting that, like, yeah, you know, some of these races, like anything, like, you know, we're both video people, you know, editing is such a huge part of pace and entertainment and crafting
live
the
production
narrative. I know. And doing it live is like a nightmare. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
But obviously, there are perhaps some strategic directorial ways in which they can add a bit of oomph to some of the action. And one of those ways is by sacking that Monaco guy, and they've done it.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I guess it will be seen whether there's a tangible... it'd be really tough to tell, you know, without a scientific comparison of the exact same race, you know. But
they should A/B test it. They should have two people edit it.
See, that you could do.
Make a new reality TV show out of it, you know? Just have a bunch of people live do it. You could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One more thing I wanted to mention is, you know, if you maybe you caught the broadcast that Formula One did on their YouTube channel, as sort of a make good for Imola. They broadcast, I think, the 2005 and the 2021 races at Imola in full on their YouTube channel.
Right.
I didn't try to watch it, so I don't know if they were geo-blocked or what. They are not apparently in the archives of their YouTube channel, so they took them down.
Oh, okay.
Interestingly, the 2008 Monaco full race is there. Another, like, just so happens, they rarely do this, so I'm kind of surprised. But if you are looking for more stuff to watch, we had mentioned F1 Academy in the past. That is the female-only racing series that is meant to graduate drivers to the F1 ladder onto Formula 3 and Formula 2. They are not broadcasting it live, but they have been covering the races with highlights on their YouTube channel. And I just discovered that they're, in addition to the highlights, they're also doing like a more behind the scenes reel that is like the highlights, about 15 minutes long. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a link to it in the show notes.
Is that also on YouTube? That other?
Yeah, F1's YouTube.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I saw they did the older race for Imola. I didn't realize they had done last year's as well.
Yeah. It's kind of a bummer that we have a race this weekend because there's so much more to watch. So you want to watch the sim races, you want to watch that stuff, you want to watch Monaco 2008. F1's got your back. But we want to watch Monaco, Danny, or do we? Let's talk about it. Let's discuss.
Yeah, Monaco is such a funny little thing. I feel like in years past it was more sacrilegious to call into question the right of Monaco to host an F1 race.
How dare you? These hallowed grounds.
Danny. It is an ancient race. It's been in the F1 calendar since 1950. The first race they ever held here was in 1929. It was hosted by a guy called Anthony Nogue. You will remember that surname, Nogue, from the corner on the track, probably. He was I believe a tobacco businessman who wanted to race around town with his chums, so he set up a race. That's what we're talking about here. In the ritzy glitzy, disgusting wealth world of F1, there is no jewel shinier than that of the city-state in southern France, the Monte Carlo, the Monaco Grand Prix. Like I said, it's 78 laps long, 3.337 kilometers. It's just over 2.07 miles, and I guess the theater of this race, if you're new to F1, is that it is insane that these cars are driving here. It is a incredibly tight street circuit happening in this ancient, almost 1,000-year-old, 800-year-old city. There's so many of the best drivers in the world have raced here. It means a great deal to drivers when they win here, when they qualify in pole position here. It's been the scene of fantastical races over the years, but it has the potential to be an absolute drag. I will say that in recent years, some of the best Monaco races we've had have been down to strategy, sometimes good, sometimes bad, weather, usually bad, and then the odd, incident that sort of shuffled the deck, like a crash that happens at a bad time. Crashes tend to happen here for obvious reasons. Red flags tend to happen here for obvious reasons. It's very difficult to get these cars out of the way, especially when
they've gotten pretty good at it.
They're probably the best. Like, they're some of the best in the world at removing. They have those removal cranes everywhere, and it's the one place I think where you'll see a car removed faster than anywhere else. Also a byproduct of sort of how small and compact the track generally is.
One of our favorite pieces of trivia is that the track would not pass muster if it were new. Formula One would say, no, that can't be a track. It's too dangerous, or it's too tight. It's just like, there are certain things in place that are just grandfathered in, and Monaco is one of those.
100%. And over the years, there's definitely also been changes to some of the runoff areas. For instance, out of the tunnel at the bottom of the braking zone there is a lot safer than it used to be after some dodgy crashes about 15 years ago. There's been some stuff. There's a couple of bigger sort of runoff areas as a result of places where they kind of know crashes or overtakes might happen. A lot of the crashes here come down to, well, number one, it's driver error is a harsh way of putting it, but just drivers clipping the wall a little bit too quickly. And then the other one is obviously just trying to overtake. It's so difficult to overtake here that oftentimes somebody will throw it up the inside, and these F1 mirrors are not great on a big track, and they're even more useless when everyone's sitting at everyone's blind spots. So that's what tends to happen. Last year's race was really good, but almost entirely down to the fact that it hadn't rained at all until the morning of the race, and then it was just pouring, absolutely bucketing down. The race started late. It started under a safety car. There was a red flag. Then you had the hilarity / calamity of the Ferrari double pit stop that basically screwed Leclerc, who'd gotten a pole. Charles Leclerc grew up in Monaco. He is Monegasque. Perhaps the most important thing to any Monegasque racing driver is winning the Monaco Grand Prix. Then there was another red flag when Mick Schumacher completely destroyed his Haas around the swimming pool chicane.
That's right, he like tore it in half.
Oh, the back of the car just came right off. And that was, we have sort of since learned, was maybe the weekend that put the writing on the wall for Mick. Because there's nothing Gene Haas hates more than wasting money on broken cars. And then ultimately the race, like I said earlier, was finished before the prescribed 78 laps because we had reached the 3-hour total time from the start of the race to the checkered flag. And the winner was actually Sergio Perez, and Carlos Sainz came second. And I think it was after that then it was Verstappen because of the red flag, which basically allowed the two of them who hadn't pitted yet to get a fresh set of rubbers on. So it was actually a really fun race, but mostly because of weather and crashes. So, you know, we don't like cheering and looking for crashes. Given the week we just had or that Italy just had, we don't necessarily want to cheer for that inclement weather either. But, you know, if you want to go to race in Monaco, sometimes you gotta pray for it.
You know what I am cheering for, though, is a good qualifying session because, as we've mentioned, Monaco's very tight, very difficult to pass. And something that's happened a lot in this season so far is that Red Bull, the dominant team, not so great at qualifying.
Yes.
So
that's true. Yeah.
Might conspire to make something interesting.
You could argue that Ferrari should have had it locked up last year because of Charles Leclerc getting that pole.
Yep.
But yeah, you're right. It's not that hard, but you know, like there is one DRS zone on this track, and it is the start-finish straight, and that Red Bull has a really good DRS. So we may see some action up into turn one if Verstappen tries to do it there. But a lot of the places where there's overtaking in Monaco are those harsh braking zones down into after the tunnel at turn 10 is a really big one, and then there can be some cheeky overtakes and some other funny parts like turn 5 before they get into that crazy little you know, going down the hill by the hotel curve. Sometimes people throw it up the inside there. There's a couple of spots where there's a bit more runoff for the person who got overtaken, so that's kind of why they pick those corners.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a little bit about the track. I think for a lot of tracks, it's difficult for me to conjure up more than like a turn or two. But Monaco, I don't feel like I am very good at visualizing this kind of 3D space, but I can picture a lot of this track. And it's not just because, you know, I've watched a lot of Formula One, because it's not like that for all the other tracks. Monaco is just like, I think because it's so just set in a city and there's like shops and everything around, and its topography is all over the place, and it's all just very narrow, and it's right by the water. Like it's very easy to orient yourself. So yeah, just to call out a couple kind of key parts here, and not all of them are necessarily like the most exciting sporting places, but you know, they're fun to see. Like the turn 6, the tightest hairpin in Formula One, where you like watch for the onboards, because it's more than 180 degrees. Like they have to really crank their steering wheel. It's almost like they're turning it over twice. Yeah. And then hold it with their opposite hand sometimes. It's really crazy.
I think it was last year Nicholas Latifi either misjudged it or couldn't brake fast enough to get his wheel turned in, but just straight up didn't make the turn. And if you don't make the turn, it's not like you can reverse out of there and try again. It's a real like, you don't want to mess that one up. Yeah. And downhill as well, which it doesn't help things.
Yeah, it really is kind of a corkscrew. And then you've got the tunnel, of course, which is just such an amazing feature.
Yeah.
Down into that chicane, then along the waterfront, then that other chicane where I think for people who've watched the last few years will remember as the one that Charles Leclerc completely binned it. Then then the the twisties back up the hill. Yeah, it's great.
All of these turns do have official names, but I like your ones better, I think.
Thank you.
The twisties up the hill. Yeah, like you said, I think there's just so much unique, what would you call them, points of interest I get if this was game design, and also the orientation of the waterfront makes it very obvious from a lot of shots. They also tend to just I don't know, I feel like they do a lot more onboards here. I feel like there's less helicopter shots. I don't know.
Well, yeah. It's between buildings.
Right. So they, and also just the sense of speed when you're going past houses is different to when you're going past forests that are maybe 200 feet off of the track. So it's just an incredible. I feel like YouTube compression or video compression has to do a lot of work at Monaco to stop it from being blurry.
I mean, it's got a lot of tree branches casting shadows and
right in and out of tunnels. It's completely insane. I think if you I always find it funny whenever the video games come out if you just try and drive in Monaco in first person and just even with all the driving assists on, it's a nightmare. It's absolutely insane that they do this, and such a remarkable celebration of the talents of these people that they can do it, and even when they crash, I'm like, sure, you already did the impossible 60 laps. You had to crash eventually.
Yeah, it's kind of a numbers game. Yeah, the video games, I feel like the Monaco Grand Prix is the racing game equivalent of Triple H's hair. Right. Where that was the bellwether to be like, how good is hair technology? There's always going to be a wrestling game, so we all have to check Triple H's hair. Now with racing games, it's how good does the Monaco look?
Yeah, totally. I remember I used to do it, and also because rain makes games look really realistic. Put that post-processing in there. I'd always test that out whenever it came out, which is also the worst way to start playing the F1 game is to do Monaco in the rain. But yeah, it's funny. I remember in my head, playing F1 Grand Prix on the Amiga, Jeff Crammon's F1 Grand Prix, game that he made by himself and is largely thought of as one of the best F1 games of all time. And I still remember how Monaco looked in that game, and it was the one circuit that when I saw it in real life, I knew every turn.
Oh, that's cool.
With other ones, because they didn't have the trees or any of that sort of stuff, you couldn't really get a sense of the space. But Monaco is just it's very unique in that way, and even in the modern era of Liberty really hamming up what they think is, I guess, the future of F1 perhaps is having these street circuit races in the middle of these cities, Vegas and Jeddah and everything. Monaco is not like those. It is tighter, it is twistier, it is more historic. As much as it can be a boring race, every once in a while we get a good one, and I feel like it needs one good race out of 4, and that's kind of enough to keep it on the calendar, maybe.
Yeah, well, as the calendar shifts to Monaco, let's look at the weather. It looks to be on qualifying and the race day in the mid to low 70s in terms of temperature. That's low 20s for all you Celsius heads out there. But the big question, precipitation. We always do this a fair number of days ahead of time, but according to the weather I'm looking at here, there is a 44% chance of precipitation at qualifying time.
Ooh.
And just ahead of the race, it is 70%,
oh boy,
dipping to 40% by race time. So, and kind of up and down over the course of the day on each of them. So, if anything, maybe a wet track. But with those temperatures, maybe it'll burn off. Who knows?
It's hard to tell. Coastal city, it's got a big mountain behind it, lots of potential for relief rain and all that sort of stuff. I'm saying nothing, Drew. Last week, I clearly invoked the F1 gods, the weather gods. Let's just see what happens. I let's just see what happens.
I don't think it matters at all what we say. Sometimes, I don't know.
You're saying I don't control the universe, Drew Scanlon?
I'm not saying that.
You're saying that my perspective is not the one truth of reality? How dare you?
Well, the numbers don't lie, Danny, and Max Verstappen is on top of the Drivers' Championship with 119 points. Behind him, his teammate, Sergio Perez, 105 points. In third place, Fernando Alonso with 75, then Lewis Hamilton in fourth with 56. Carlos Sainz Jr. in fifth place with 44 points. Behind him, George Russell with 40, Charles Leclerc, hometown hero, in Monaco with 34 points. Then we've got Lance Stroll in 8th with 27, Lando Norris with 10, and Pierre Gasly in 10th place with 8 points. Behind him, a tie between Nico Hulkenberg and Esteban Ocon with 6, then another tie between Valtteri Bottas and Oscar Piastri with 4, and then a three-way tie for 15th place with Zhou Guanyu, Yuki Tsunoda, and Kevin Magnussen with 2. Alex Albon's in 18th place with 1 point, and Logan Sargent and Nick DeVries have 0. In the constructor standings, Red Bull Racing is in the lead, so to speak, with 224 points to Aston Martin's
To me, so to speak.
102. Mercedes is in third with 96. That's a close battle. Ferrari is in fourth with 78. And I've probably said this before, but it doesn't feel like that, you know?
I'm like shocked of what you just said. I did not realize who was in second.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of consternation about like, oh, Mercedes, but like Ferrari is behind Mercedes and they don't feel worse to me. Do you know what I mean?
It shows you just how consistency, especially the early part of the season, really puts a lot of emphasis on or is so influential on the standings, you know?
Yeah.
But
McLaren and Alpine are tied in fifth place with 14 points. That's a big gulf from 78 to 14 between fourth and fifth. And then Gene Haas team, they're in seventh place with 8 points. Alfa Romeo has 6, Alpha Tauri has 2, and Williams has 1. Still a lot to play for in the latter half of the field.
You mentioned Nick DeVries. Maybe worth mentioning some of the rumors that are swirling around him.
Oh.
Yeah.
Let's talk rumors, Danny.
Yeah, I feel like, so obviously he's been not enjoying the most wonderful season, and he is behind his teammate. And he is, you know, the one of the things we're talking about with DeVries, he is a rookie, but he's 28 years old. He's no,
and a Formula 2 and Formula E champion.
Yeah, but he's no spring chicken either. So I think that's giving him a little less rope to play with. You know what I mean? I feel like he's on a little bit of a tighter leash, and as a result, there has been, I don't know if this is generated from the paddock. I don't know. Perhaps some of this is, I assume some of it's coming out of AlphaTauri because we tend to get some of that, stern talk about some of the drivers out of there. But there does seem to be a little bit of a worry that there could be a mid-season replacement happening here unless he sort of picks up the pace. Who that could be, you know, some folks are saying Danny Ricciardo. Keep it in the family.
I do know they were saying that, and I think at least that rumor may have started from the fact that Ricciardo went down to AlphaTauri for a seat fitting, which does jive with the fact that he is their so-called third driver, or Red Bull's third driver. So if he needed to step in, if someone got sick or something, it makes sense that Ricciardo would fill in there.
The other one is Liam Lawson, who
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, and I think I haven't been following exactly what's going on with him, but I do.
He's the other reserve driver for Red Bull, I think.
I think he must be. He's on the Red Bull team. I know that for sure. He's a junior driver with them. I think he's in Super Formula in Japan, and I might be wrong, but I think either they've sewn up the championship or something's happened over there that's basically freed him up a little bit. I didn't research this for today's episode, but I also heard that there's a possibility there. So, you know, in any case, regardless of whether or not these rumors are true, I do feel like we are in sort of maybe like put up or shut up territory for DeVries. You know, the season. I think not having this one race, I feel like not having Emilia-Romagna and having to go straight to Monaco in an F1 car is probably not the easiest thing he'd like to do. And we saw a Drive to Survive how much Yuki had to, tough time with this particular track as well, just having the confidence to go around it fast. But yeah, interesting times for somebody who looked like one of the most confident bets for F1 at the start of the season, but just hasn't found his groove yet.
The other rumor I saw, perhaps even less
catty little
corroboratory
rumor mill people over here. What you got?
Is Ferrari signing Lewis Hamilton.
Oh.
But the other thing that I saw soon after that was something along the lines of, even Italian media doesn't think that this rumor is true. So
yeah,
take that with a truckload of salt.
Yeah, it's funny how we always do that with ex-champions. I feel like there's always a thing about an ex-champion not having the patience when trying to get back in the winning column. And I guess there's something to that. But yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one, isn't it, with Hamilton and Mercedes? Because while Mercedes aren't having a good time, I think generally we all sort of feel in ourselves that they're just like one little engineering, solution away from being right back there. It feels, for some reason, it feels closer than like Ferrari to me. But also, I don't know, it's now been 2 years of them having bomb cars, so I don't know why I think that. It's just like recency bias or something.
But I mean, that's Formula One, right? Like Mercedes has been there quite recently. Ferrari hasn't been there in a while. So that would be a strange move if I were Lewis Hamilton, unless he's seen something that's like, that unnerves him about the current state of Mercedes. I don't know.
And in recent years, I'm struggling to see a lateral move from a lead driver that has paid off in that way. Like, Max has had a lot of pretenders in the second place. Like, Perez didn't make a lateral move. That was an upgrade for him, right? To go to Red Bull, it's a no-brainer. But like, obviously Daniel Ricciardo had an awful time making his lateral moves. You could argue Vettel, it never really worked out. Until this year, Alonso was doing exactly the same thing. Alonso this year is probably the only one that I can think of in recent memory, at least with the top teams, So yeah, it's risky. It's really risky to do that. You can always blame somebody else if you're in a good team, whereas that isn't performing. Whereas if you make the change, then it's kind of on you if you're not. If the car didn't work out as well, it feels like it damages the brand of the driver a bit more.
Well, if you'd like to draft your own drivers to your own team, you can do so in the Shift+F1 Fantasy League using the link in the show notes. And you can also send us our hot rumor tips to our email address at shift1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails.
Thank you.
Let's take it to the emails, shall we, Danny?
Sure, let's do it.
This first one comes in from Phil, who says, "Hey guys, I'm a newer Formula One fan who started watching early in the 2021 season. Now that I have a couple seasons under my belt, I find myself increasingly agreeing with the general opinion of the podcast that practice is not exactly required viewing. But when I was brand new to the sport, I got a lot of mileage out of tuning in for those sessions. As someone who was new not only to F1 but motorsport in general, I really valued having time when I could get used to the cars going around the track in a setting that wasn't as information dense as races could be. At the beginning, you don't know the circuits, what's important to how the cars run, how to tell when a car is really pushing or not, what it looks like when a driver makes a mistake, etc. There's a lot going on all at once, and it can be hard to parse all of that information during a race. Practice isn't usually exciting, but it is a way to get more familiar with how things work. If you don't know very much about the sport, it can be very educational. I found watching practice helped me get a lot more out of watching races. You guys do a great job of making a pretty complicated sport approachable to new fans, and your preseason primer was a critical resource for getting me into the sport. Really appreciate all you do. Thank you very much, Phil."
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. And I would double down on the fact that because there's not a lot going on in practice, the commentators really reach back into the depths of their knowledge to pull out fun nuggets of information. And so you do get a lot of really interesting stuff and about like the minutia Because, Phil's right. When a race is going on, you're talking about what is happening. And
Right.
occasionally Martin Brundle, this is why I love Martin Brundle, is because he's really good at, illustrating why something is difficult or like what exactly is happening while it is happening. But for practice, they do a really good job of like, what if scenarios or, just really stuff that would not be relevant during the race, and really gets at those kind of smaller questions that you don't even know you have.
Yeah, I feel like you kind of have to watch it differently. Like to me, for all the reasons you just said, practice can be really entertaining. But in the same way, like a race, whenever things happen, it's all about what's happening in the moment and the immediate permutations and what that means for the drive that's going on there. The commentary is basically like watching a football game or a soccer game or a hockey or basketball game. If you're watching practice, it's like baseball, or it's like cricket. You know what I mean? Where you don't have to watch it all the time. It's something to have on that you can turn to when something really important happens. But like you said, you have that sort of like regional commentator who knows the nitty gritty, and in the F1, format, usually they have maybe a co-commentator who's not on all the time, or one of the presenter staff is in for a bit. They often swap them out as well between practice sessions or during sometimes too, and they'll give like Ted Kravitz a lot of time if you're watching that broadcast on Sky. And I think like you said, you get a lot of that flavor. But I wouldn't, don't put yourself off watching practice by trying to sit down and watch it like an F1. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of something you can put on in the background or have on in the room, and then when you hear the crack of the bat, kind of run in and check it out.
I would also, on the flip side, don't feel like you need to watch practice. You're really not missing anything in terms of like the story of the weekend, the way that I think that you would be if you missed qualifying.
Yeah, I would suggest maybe watching the highlights though on YouTube, because I think sometimes there's some stuff that can really make,
in that respect, yes.
Yeah, just for if there's an incident or if somebody's not getting up to speed. But like you said, when you're watching qualifying, they're usually filling in that stuff anyway of what happened in practice. So it's not required viewing.
Danny, you want to take this next one from Blake?
I sure do. Hey, Shift+F1, longtime fan. Back from the Alt F1 days and the Austin meetup.
Oh, wow.
That's a blast from the past. And also, I was one of the weirdos who listened to the podcast but didn't watch the races the first season or two. Blake, nice. There are dozens of you, if not hundreds. Anyway, with the cancellation of Imola, the Formula One YouTube channel showed some classic Imola races. 2021, George and Bottas's infamous crash, and also 2005, Schumacher versus Alonso. As someone who had only started actually watching the races in 2015, going back to 2005 made no sense to me. No tire changes, refueling, the laps count down instead of up. I enjoy going back and watching some of these classic races. I watched the Canadian race you guys mention all the time, 2011 I think. Yes, that's right. During 2020 and really enjoyed it. But 2005 is apparently too far because the strategy and cars is intelligible to me. Given all this context, how far back can modern F1 fans go? Obviously, seeing familiar drivers helps, but even with Alonso, Raikkonen, Button, Massa, and the Schumacher brothers, etc., this race was hard to follow personally. I'm guessing the answer is somewhere between 2006 and 2010, but I wanted to get your opinions. Thanks, Blake in Texas. This is a very objective question, I feel like, because
objective?
Subjective, sorry.
Okay.
Yes. Because I guess it does depend on the type of like era that you joined, I guess, watching F1. Before
I guess his question is like the modern F1 fan, the kind of me, right? He's talking about starting in 2015. It's like the beginning of the turbo hybrid era.
The hybrid stuff, exactly. Yeah. Like I feel like if that's the answer for you, then I guess, do you feel weird going back and watching stuff that's like older than?
Yeah. So during COVID, I went back and I sat down and was like, all right, I'm gonna watch every Michael Schumacher race, because it's
Whoa,
like, okay, he's a titan of the the sport, right? It would be important to know a lot about his career. That was hard. Because I went back to, when was his first race? It was
like early 90s at least.
yeah.
But
And the races are different. You alluded earlier, Danny, to the fact that the broadcasts really just focus on the leaders, and so they're not very interesting. And I love the old commentary by why am I blanking on his name?
Murray Walker.
Murray Walker, yeah. Who I never really got to hear live. But it is a little more, you could tell it's just a guy in a room looking at a TV, and he's really he doesn't have all the data that we have now, really at the whims of whatever the TV director is doing, and they really do focus kind of on the front of the field. And so it is pretty difficult to go back. I think it's an interesting academic exercise. I did get a lot out of it, but it's not that entertaining. I think Blake, you really kind of hit the nail on the head here. It's about because watching 2011, that was really cool, and I think you can go back a little further, and then you do get some of that like fun. It's almost like being in another country, you recognize a lot of stuff, but it is a little different. Although I don't know, I haven't actually gone back and watched a lot of that era of racing. I imagine it would be a lot of like just down to how entertaining that particular season was. Cause like some seasons, even if they're very different, if they're close, I feel like they could probably still be interesting.
Yeah, it's funny because there are sort of how you break down the eras of F1. Oftentimes we do it by like the sort of dominance of a particular team or of a particular driver. But as you mentioned, the turbo hybrid era, obviously there's like the 3-liter era, the V8 era. Like you can compartmentalize F1 down into those, and where some of the I guess changes to the regulations, but also just how the cars sound. Like the 3-liter era, the V8 era. Like I feel like I in a way I feel like maybe the sort of 2005 to like 95 era might be the weirdest, because it feels there's an uncanny valley-ness to it where they start to look like modern F1 cars, but they still have a lot of the older like I don't know, some of the older aspects of the cars or the engines or even the tracks they're running on might be and the rule sets, and definitely the broadcasting feels like it's in a different era. Perhaps it's easier to go back to like the Senna era, the early 90s and stuff, the 3-liters and watch that stuff because it's so far removed. Like
and the cars are simpler, when you start getting into like early 2000s, they do get more complex, but like in ways that are still pretty different.
And like honestly, things like telemetry end up starting to be much more of a presence like during the race. There was obviously always an element of that, but the sort of the ability for data to be processed in real time by pit walls, and now as we talk about back at home bases, and running all these models and sending the data to the circuit in real time, that definitely started to have, like Rob talks about it a lot. Like Rob would be great to answer this question because he's sort of has this particularly strong unbroken run of history with F1, and I had like a 10-year period in there where I wasn't watching live races.
Dark Ages.
Exactly, yeah. Danny's Dark Ages, the 10-year war of Danny's life between all the other sports trying to grab my attention. But obviously, yeah, like the refueling, for instance, was something that once they had figured out the math behind it, became completely redundant because they just were able to optimize that almost immediately. And if you go back to earlier generations, and just like how those cars, I mean, you don't see F1 cars drifting anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they
man.
they
They're
hung
so small.
They
They're
hung
nimble.
them out. They're so light. They were just like downforce machines for a lot of the time, and they screamed like banshees, man. And they were just like, so I do wonder if Blake should go back and taste some of that sweet, like early 90s, late 80s, you know, the 3.5s even, and just, I don't know, see how that tastes, I guess. Because like you said, it definitely is simpler, I feel like, than the sort of like, you know, Schumacher era of the late 90s before we totally changed in the late aughts.
Yeah. Should I take this next one from James?
Go for it.
Hello, Shift F1 crew. Like all of you, I assume I watch F1 not to support a single team or driver, but instead to watch all the teams, drivers, and anyone involved in this crazy sport interact and compete on and off the track with some cutting edge engineering thrown in.
Off the track? I want to. What am I missing a part of F1? It'd be Bernie Ecclestone versus Hamilton.
I mean, Drive to Survive, its own dramatic battle.
Good point.
One of those actors is Liberty Media and the FIA themselves. And while I have really enjoyed my F1 TV subscription, seeing Buxton and his co-presenters take more and more responsibility away from the Sky F1 audio feed, I do sometimes get strong state-owned media vibes from them.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit worried that it might be affecting the potential drama of the sport. Back in 2009, for example, several teams threatened to start their own motorsport series in a fight with the FIA. I remember every pre-race and post-race interview at the time being dominated by the subject. If something like that were to happen now, I cannot see the F1 TV crew directly asking questions about it to their employer. With Liberty Media now fully throwing their weight around with things like an ever-growing calendar and more sports washing street circuits, do you think that having their own media division was created to shield themselves from criticism, or am I being too cynical? And if it is, how do you hold Liberty Media and the FIA accountable without outside journalists? Have always loved the podcast and will be a patron for as long as you let us. James in Berlin. Thank you, James.
Thanks, James.
I do have this concern. Where I go to it is watching the NFL in America.
Right.
It is not as direct as like the NFL owns the commentators, but they do toe the party line pretty well. It's all money, right? It's all like you work for ABC, you can't say this or we'll lose our broadcast license because like the NFL broadcast rights are so coveted because there's so many eyeballs on them. So yeah, I do worry about that, and I think I don't think I'm quite as cynical as you mentioned, James. I don't think they created the media division to shield themselves, but it is to control the narrative, right? Because we've seen these things kind of get out of control. Even in this era, like the We Race as One stuff was really limp. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Danny?
It's funny because like media goes through like eras and who's in power and who isn't. And F1, like anyone who's been watching Formula One, especially in the UK for the past 30 years, knows just how political the getting the rights are in and of themselves. It's funny in a way to be in a position where you're looking at Sky as the voice of true journalism when they are arguably one of the most erosive factors in British journalism, at least that historically, perhaps in many respects, and but again, it all goes through eras, and there's in some ways they've done solid reporting in some political areas and in sport as well, but they basically have a wrap on much of soccer. They used to have way more of a tighter leash on all like stuff like the Premier League, and now it's a bit more fragmented with Virgin and BT and a bunch of other ones, depending on where you are in the UK, Ireland, or in Europe. But I remember when F1, when Sky came in with the F1 channel, like that was a really big power play to wrench F1 out of the hands of publicly owned broadcasters like the BBC and Channel 4, of course, who I was watching F1 on for the first time in God knows how long, 10 years, when I was back home just this past month in Ireland watching with my sister. So yeah, it's It's always funny. Like, we talked a lot about the F1 TV stuff as this sort of like rough, but trying their best type of broadcaster for years, and as they have gotten more resources and the team has gotten more talented and more experience, it is starting to go more toe to toe with Sky. And I agree with James that I do get a big state-run media, it's funny because I like state-run media and the BBC because I find them, at least politically maybe not so much. That's a whole other conversation to be had, but like definitely with like the way they report on soccer, I think is in a very independent sort of way, and I would trust them with something like F1. But I do get the toe the party line vibe a bit from Buxton and co. And I like him, but like he's definitely, a presenter in many ways, and he comes across that way.
Yeah, and you do get a trade-off, right? Because their team has way more access than something like Sky. Like, for example, their podcast, right? Because they're the F1. Yeah, because they're the F1 podcast officially, they can get access to the F1, all of the F1 drivers and like historical people and all that stuff. And I guess it's not necessarily true for the teams because they're not necessarily, or actually they do have some kind of stipulation that they need to submit their technical upgrades to. I think that's all open though. It's not necessarily all that F1 does, but Sam Collins does great work doing the technical discussions. Terrific. So yeah, there's a lot to like there. But yeah, just I guess remember who pays their paychecks.
Yeah, I would say that I feel like, I don't think it's that dire. I get the whiff of it every now and again.
Yeah.
But I do think that, like, in a weird way, we're probably in the best era when it comes to journalism around F1. And, obviously taking into account just the popularity and the explosion in YouTube over the past few years and citizen reporting. Obviously, we've just seen this crazy bum rush from all these sports and news organizations to hire some of the best talent in F1 writing onto their news desks, onto their sports desks. And we do have a choice between, Sky and F1 TV. And if you're in the UK, you've got Channel 4 doing their highlights too. I would be really interested to know what the numbers are when it comes to the US audience in particular. Like, does the US audience, do any of them swap to the international feed when they're watching on F1 TV, or do they tend
they
to
recently
just
changed the default? Yeah,
they did. Yes. So I wonder, is that part of the strategy and the slow erosion, perhaps? But we're in a good spot right now, and there have been times where it's not been so great, or you were stuck with one, commentator you really did not like, and you just had to listen to them for years. So we're not doing too bad at the moment.
You're right. It's good to have options.
Last email here, I'll take from Nick. Says, if you fellas could add one more event to the Triple Crown of Motorsport to turn it into a 4-event Grand Slam of Motorsport, what event would you add, Nick? And I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Monaco is one of the current Motorsport Triple Crowns. The other two are the Indy 500 and, of course, Le Mans. Will I go first, Drew, or do you have any? I have two. I have one that's sort of like maybe a pragmatic one, and then I have one that's a crazy one.
Okay, I also have one of each of those, and we should mention that it's an unofficial thing. This is not. There's no governing body for this. It's just like, the Triple Crown is just like bragging rights for anyone who can do it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
How about you? Okay, I'll go first with my pragmatic one that I think might actually be interesting. I think the Dakar Rally. I think, kind of like Le Mans, it is one of these races where you just have to finish it. It's kind of like even finishing it is kind of impossible. It's on such a long. It takes such a long period of time for them to finish it. It's a point-to-point race through incredibly difficult terrain. More importantly, I think there are a lot of other races that you could put in that might not speak to like racecraft so much. It might be based more on weird older cars or stuff like that, or you could pick another track. It might not be that different. What I like about the Triple Crown is that there's a little bit of they each have their own flavor to them, and I think Dakar, while being, definitely way different because it doesn't happen on a circuit, I do think that it is still a racecraft. Just about is still sort of a race in the way that, like, because you could say, like, I don't know, like Baja or like Pikes Peak, maybe, I don't know, but like something like that. But I think Dakar is a bit crazy, but I think it works, and it's it's been around since the late 70s, so it's old enough too.
Yeah, I think my pragmatic answer is the Daytona 500.
That's actually a good show. Yeah,
you've got 2 European races in there. You need to balance it out with one more American one. And stock cars they're popular. It's that's the jewel in the crown of NASCAR. I think my fun answer though is I also am going rally here, and it is the Baja 1000. But you have to race a Volkswagen Beetle.
Bajas. I feel like. Yeah, I think you're right, actually. I think Daytona might be the most honest fit, maybe. Bathurst is also, you said Baja, and I just thought about Bathurst then. I was like, that will be fun.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Why am I thinking America-centric? There's a whole other hemisphere down there.
And that's often a really good race, and often comes down to the wire.
And they're stock cars.
My crazy one.
Ish.
My crazy one, which would require, some new skill learning, is the Isle of Man TT, which
my God,
is probably the craziest race in all of motorsport. If as much as I've waxed lyrical about how insane Monaco is, the Isle of Man TT is, the fact that we are still allowing it to happen in the year of our Lord 2023. It is the closest thing to sport gets to gladiatorial combat. It is insanely dangerous. There is often loss of life, and the speed and skill at which these mostly amateur drivers are taking around this insanely weird old island track, streets circuit. I don't even call it a street circuit. It's just country roads. Is completely insane, and it has been running for over 100 years. Although they were going much slower when they started it.
Yeah, yes. If you are curious about that, you should go back and listen to our Patreon episode on what is the name of that movie?
Of the Isle of Man TT. I watched it in 3D. Over the Edge, Closer to the Edge?
I think it's Closer to the Edge.
I saw it in Leicester Square in 3D, and it was absolutely insane.
Yeah.
They had a short run when it was in 3D. I watched it with a bunch of petrolhead bikers I used to work with in London. It was fantastic. Great movie.
Worth pointing out, there's only been one winner of the Triple Crown of motorsport, and that is Graham Hill. He won the Indianapolis 500, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and the Monaco Grand Prix, and was Formula One world champion. Other winners, or other close competitors with 2 of the 3.
Alonso.
We have Tazio Nuvolari. He won the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1933 and the Monaco Grand Prix in 1932. So we're going back a while. The other, Maurice Trintignant from France. This is in the 50s.
It's probably
AJ
pronounced
Foyt.
Trintignant.
That's probably how you pronounce it, French. AJ Foyt, Indy 500 and Le Mans. Bruce McLaren, Le Mans and Monaco. Jochen Rindt, Le Mans and Monaco. And then we jump all the way to the 2000s with Juan Pablo Montoya, who's won the Indianapolis 500 twice and the Monaco Grand Prix. And then Fernando Alonso, who's won Le Mans twice and Monaco twice. Not so much the Indy 500.
It's funny. That's what you're right, though. That's why you need to have the other ones out of the continent, because you need to stretch it, right? Put it outside their comfort zone just that little bit.
Monaco and Indy is tough because they happen on the same weekend.
Oh, right. You're right, actually. That doesn't help.
And I think there have been drivers that have done the double, so to speak.
Like flown over and done both.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Well, thank you for the emails. Shift+F1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. You can also hit us up on the socials, which are in the show notes. That's us around the internet. Should we take it around the world of racing, Danny?
Let's race around the world. Yeah.
Speaking of flying to different parts of the world for racing, Formula 2 and Formula 3 will be supplementing Formula 1 in Monaco this weekend. We've got those Craftsman trucks at the Charlotte Motor Speedway in Concord, North Carolina for the North Carolina Education Lottery 200. DTM is back, Danny.
Oh, finally. I've been waiting with bated breath.
Ja, the Motorsport Arena Oberschlafsbrennen. Which I'm sure is how you pronounce that.
Are you okay? Do you need to call a doctor?
Oschersleben. Yeah.
Please don't talk about my Oschersleben without my permission.
The NASCAR Xfinity Series also at Charlotte for the Alsco Uniforms 300. IndyCar. Speaking of the Indy 500 and the Monaco Grand Prix, they are both on this weekend. It is the 107th running of the Indy 500 at Indianapolis Motor Speedway in Speedway, Indiana, USA. And we got NASCAR. Counter-programming at its best.
We don't like
Charlotte
TTM.
for the, what could be more American, the Coca-Cola 600. Just had to one-up the Indy, Not 500, we're 600. Yeah. Also, Coca-Cola.
600. Coca-Cola. Take that, lilt, or whatever they have. You ever had a lilt? That's not in America, is it?
No, I don't know what that is.
It's like a pineapple kind of fizzy drink. Totally tropical taste. Love a lilt. Shout out to all the lilt fans out there.
Guess I have my thumbnail image for the weekend or for the episode. And Formula 1, maybe you've heard of it. Friday, things kick off. Free Practice 1 at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPN 2. That's May 26th. Free Practice 2 is 11 a.m. Eastern on ESPN 2. Then Saturday, May 27th, Free Practice 3 kicks off at 6:30 a.m. Eastern on ESPN 2, and then qualifying at 10 a.m. on ESPN. But the race, everyone, Sunday, May 28th at 9 a.m. Eastern, over the air on ABC. That's right.
Just easy as 1, 2, 3.
Get those rabbit ears ready. The American Broadcasting Corporation has your back. But that's what's happening this weekend. What has happened on this day, Danny, in Formula One history? There it is, the book, in the flesh.
I have the book. I'm at home. I'm in my new house we're renting in beautiful Petaluma. Those of you watching the YouTube version of this podcast can see the amazing petal trim that our landlords have labored us with. I'm very excited. It's not just this room. It's in quite a number of the rooms. And it definitely doesn't bother me all that much. On this day, May 24th, Mika Hakkinen made it a clean sweep at the Monaco Grand Prix today in 1998, taking the hat-trick of pole position, fastest lap, and the win. The smaller teams are always trying to gain an edge in Formula One, and today in 2001, the Arrows and Jordan teams left their garages to start the Thursday practice session for the Monaco Grand Prix amid gasps from onlookers. Can you guess why, Drew?
Were they nude?
Unfortunately not. Both teams had arrived with bizarre-looking extra front wing attachments designed to give them extra front downforce. The FAA banned them immediately on the grounds of safety, but perhaps also out of embarrassment. So ridiculous did they look.
Wow.
Something to Google. Yes, 2001 so. Arrows and Jordan in Monaco.
Okay. All right. Well, that's our pre-race show for Monaco. Final thoughts, Danny, ahead of this weekend's hallowed race.
Excited for a race to happen this weekend, hopefully. And it was nice to do a one-on-one pod with you, Drew. It's been a while. I miss
has.
Rob dearly, of course. Excited to have him back next week. But reminded me of the old days and also how time makes fools of us all.
Indeed. Well, hopefully we won't be made fools again with the weather. I'm also looking forward to a race, even though it is Monaco. I don't know. I'll have fun either way. If you'd like to support the show and get access to all our bonus episodes and the official Shift+F1 Discord, you can do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.
Meow.